This is Locker Room Rewind, brought to you by Chunky Gnomes Insurance. Here's Ryan Reynolds and Jaden Hart.
Welcome everyone to Locker Room Rewind. You just saw it, brought to you by Chunky Gnomes Insurance. Access to over 20 insurance companies to give you the best value. Located at 1121 South. You need reliable insurance to stay protected. Check out Chunky Gnomes today. www.chunkygnomes.com. I'm Ryan Reynolds. We also have Jaden Hart in the studio, along with the man himself, the FCA representative here in the Concho Valley, and also a super fan. I don't know anyone else who would be better to have on the show than Brett Lang. Brett, it's always good seeing you. How are you doing?
Thanks, Ryan. I'm doing great. Got to see football games last night. They're being recorded on the VCR right now at home, and life is good.
Football is back.
Football is back in week 3 of the high school football season is in the books. We're here to recap it. A ton of surprises, but I feel like we kind of sit up here every week and say that. That's just kind of the joy of the high school football season. It's just always so enjoyable.
Yeah. No, there were some surprises out there. I think that there were some that, you kind of figured what would happen happened. And then others that were close games that kind of lived up to the billing. Just a typical week of high school football, to be honest.
Some wild stories and scores to get through. Let's go ahead and run through them. Sweetwater, they hand Lakeview their first loss of the season, 58-42. We'll talk about that one coming up here in a few minutes. San Antonio, Cornerstone Christian handing Wall their first loss, 24-6, a tough one out at Hawk Stadium. Grape Creek, they pick up their first win of the season and their first win over TLCA since 2017, 42-12. That single wing exploding the scoreboard for 42 points. Ballinger, they beat Colorado City 34-2. It's an odd score from Ballinger. Brady Coleman, they hand Brady a loss 15-12. Chris Stovall, they outlast Sonora 22-14. We'll also touch on that game. Coahoma, they hand El Dorado a loss 59-34. Miles picks up their first win of the season, 29-7. Ropes beats Menard 33-6. Mason, they fall to 0-3, but they lose to a tough San Saba team 32-0. Reagan County just putting on a surprise here, defeating Ozona 46-13. Junction picking up their second straight win, 50-8. Robert Lee also picking up their first win, a ton of firsts here in week 3, 33-32 over very best Sterling City. They beat O'Donnell 58-6, and then Erie and County 51-6 over Fort Davis. Ira, they beat Eden 66-18. Bront, they lose one to Roby 54-6, and then Blackwell, they lose by 20 to Roscoe Highland. So a lot of scores and a lot to get through. Guys, just what are some of y'all's initial reactions? We'll start with you, Jaden.
I thought the big one for me was that Ozona and Reagan County, and I think that beforehand the three of us were talking about that, and just across the board kind of shocked that that was the big surprising upset of the week, I would say. Ozona losing to Reagan County. So that one stood out to me. I thought that Cristoval's win over Sonora, which I know we'll get to here in a minute, that was a game that was – I was a little like I didn't know who was going to win it. I thought Cristoval could, but then again, Sonora's played two good teams to start the season. So it was one of those deals where, Cristoval, I think, the big winners of the week in a way.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think the Ozona game, the final from there, 46-13, they lose to Reagan County. To Dave Campbell's prediction, they had Ozona winning by 37 points. That's obviously not the case. Surprising there.
Opposite of that.
I was out at Grape Creek. One of the surprises, Grape Creek putting up 42 points with the new single wing offense. That game last year finished 8-0. And we're seeing over 8-6. We're seeing over 50 points scored in that one. Brad, I know you were out at Ballinger. What else surprised you?
Like you said, the Reagan County, Coach Weston, good win for those guys. They had a tough season last year and bounced back. Are they 2-1 right now?
Yes.
That's great for our friends out in Reagan County. And I was over at Ballinger last night, and Ballinger's got a good football team.
Yeah.
Colorado City came in, beat up with some younger kids playing. It was a tough game for them, but Coach Gainey and his staff, they'll get her back together.
3 teams remaining unbeaten after week 3 in the Concho Valley. Let's focus on the action that happened at San Angelo Stadium. Sweetwater Big Country Preps, they first reported that 9 starters were going to miss that game. Just so happened to be 3 that actually missed. It was their first meeting since 2017. Sweetwater handing Lakeview their first loss of the season, 58-42. Lakeview, they allowed 22 points in the first quarter, but held them to 12 points each in the second and fourth quarters. They scored 22 points in the fourth quarter to really make it a game.
Yeah, the Lakeview Chiefs, the thing was coming into this one was they had that advantage of pretty much the entirety of Sweetwater's defense sitting, because it was 9 starters that was supposedly supposed to sit on the defensive side and 4 on the offensive side. And then as the week progressed, they got back into practice, and before game time, it was only 3 that ended up sitting total starters for the team. So that made a huge difference. And those offensive weapons, we alluded to it on Wednesday with Leo Halsey. He had a fantastic game. And one of the things I kind of wrote about in my preview this week was the team that controlled the running game would win this game. And Sweetwater, I think, put up 300-plus yards on the ground. So that was something. Lakeview struggled to stop the run so far this season. They struggled against Pecos last week. The Lamesa game wasn't necessarily one that you could look at and really use that as a gauge to measure anything on. But, last week, Pecos ran it pretty well against them, and then this week, Sweetwater does the same thing. But it wasn't without a fight there. Lakeview, coming back there towards the end.
Oh, yeah, and like you said, Sweetwater, 340 yards on the ground. Guys, go back and listen to those preview podcasts that we put out on Wednesdays. Leo Halsey, we mentioned how he was a dynamic quarterback. 12 of 21 for 220 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. He also had 9 carries for 97 yards. Insane.
Big night for the quarterback from Sweetwater.
Yeah. And go ahead.
So, you mentioned the wide receivers too. Harrison Foster, Darian Carr, 2 touchdowns each from them. And then, on the other end, Lakeview senior quarterback Albert Rodriguez, another solid game from him, 23 of 46, 364, and 3 touchdowns. Austin Bandy, also another big one. They're seniors for Lakeview, just really stepping up. It's just important for this Lakeview team to really not hang their head on this loss and come back next week.
Well, that's what they talked about before the season even started, and then getting off to the 2-0 start and everything. They said the thing that they wanted to change from last year, because they got off to the 3-0 start last season and then lost the remainder of those games, was not to collapse after one loss. It's one loss. Losses happen. It's rare that a team goes perfect across, and there are teams that will do it, but it's rare that you're not going to lose a game. And next week they get Snyder, who played Lamesa last night, and kind of a same result of how Lakeview played them. It was 40-8, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that Snyder team is probably improved from last season, the one that Lakeview saw and beat pretty handily at San Angelo Stadium.
Yeah, it's just important for Lakeview to, like I said, not hang their head and just get after Snyder. I think that would be a very interesting game. First impressions of it, I don't know who I have. I got to do more research on Snyder. But no, Lakeview, they almost came back again. 22 points they allowed in the first quarter. Held them to 12, like I said, each of the quarters 2 through 4, and then they put up 22 in the fourth of their own. So maybe a second half team for Lakeview this year.
Yeah, no, I feel like they just don't quit. I think that's pretty much what you can take away from that. They're Coach Guevara's got that program going in the right direction.
Yes, he does. And they're seniors. They've been there now with Coach Guevara for 3 years, and Albert Rodriguez. He's putting up big numbers. They're going to keep fighting. Don't worry about your Lakeview Chiefs. They're going to be just fine.
No, yeah, and they have those 2 senior wide receivers as well. Austin Bandy, he had 140 receiving yards last week. He comes back with another 190 including a 66-yard touchdown in the second quarter, which you guys saw in the highlights if you're checking out the live stream across the Facebook pages. And then the big name from week one, Tristan Franklin, back at it again, 5 receptions for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. Lakeview, they're now 2-1. They'll hit the road on Friday to take on Snyder. Kickoff from Tiger Stadium set for 7 p.m. Another surprising game out in Sonora. How about the Cristobal Cougars? They come from behind. They win 22-14. You talked to Coach Otho after the game. He walked you through that entire fourth quarter. What did Coach? What kind of insight did he give you on that, Jake?
Well, I mean, basically, it just came down to just how the game had been going, because Sonora had been just running it, and I got the time of possession pulled up here. Sonora had the ball for 30 minutes and 54 seconds, opposed to Cristobal's 16 and 19 seconds. And that wasn't because, Cristobal's going down and scoring a bunch of points. Sonora's defense played well, Cristobal struggled to get them off the field. But Coach Otho said going into the fourth quarter, the mentality was, we're going to put together a good drive, we're going to go down and score, and then our defense needs to come out and stop them. And that's what they did, because then they go down and score that game-winning touchdown. And, for Cristobal, I talked to Scott Richardson, their AD, Coach Otho, who were pretty much all in consensus. This was the first time that these two had played. That's let alone a big win, because it's not like these schools are separated by a long distance. It's one that could maybe down the road, if Cristobal maintains a good 11-man program and stays consistent. Sonora's always a traditionally good football team, could turn into a bit of a rivalry. But big takeaway is Cristobal needed to get a good win before what they've got pretty much coming down the road, because they don't play, really, in my eyes, a tough team until the big one. Week 9, district's already underway, El Dorado, and that very well could, again, decide who wins the district championship. Sonora, on the other hand, still has Alpine next week, and then they will play El Dorado. So it's not like Sonora, has a cupcake schedule going forward, and they're 0-3, so getting a win last night would have been huge for them.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done to just tell your team, hey, we need a score, and then go out and get a stop. But no, Cristobal trailed 14-6 heading into the fourth quarter. Braden Wilcox, he rushed it in to tie it at 14, and then a blocked punt that led to a touchdown with 4:14 to play. That gives Cristobal their first lead of the night with just over 4 minutes to play.
And I talk about Braden Wilcox a lot, just because of the just athletic talent that he has. Just saying something about this kid. He last week didn't start in the first quarter, and they struggled a little bit against Grape Creek. I don't think Cristobal has found their rhythm yet. Cristobal's you get them going on some of these games, and Cristobal's going to be really dangerous. But Braden Wilcox still puts up 167 yards of rushing. Last season, at one point, I think he was averaging about 200 yards a game, and he's just right back on pace. I mean, other than Wink in week 1, and Wink, we can tell now, they're I think 5th in the state, and they've beaten consistently good teams. So the fact that Cristobal was right in that football game and going into the fourth quarter. So, Braden Wilcox, that offense might not be producing a ton of points, but they're still they're getting numbers. They're being effective. It's just turning the ball over. It's the little things that will get worked out during the season.
Yeah, kid has a nice future, but we see it here again. The speed prevailing over size in the 11-man. I know we talked about it with Sterling City and in May a couple weeks ago.
And Cristobal coming from behind to win games. They're fighting. They're fighting to win football games, and when they get the front part of that thing smoothed out, could be really good for the Cougars.
And you look at that region that they're in, they no longer have to go through Wellington, Wheeler, Albany, and then Hamlin, which I know they're not one of our teams, but we just really quick, like Hamlin against Albany last night, billing was built up to be maybe one of the better games in the state, and then Hamlin just dominated them.
A blowout.
It wasn't even, and that's another statement win from Hamlin. Mart's the talk of 2A Division 2 to kind of just cruise into the state championship game, but I think you got to throw Hamlin right in the conversation of another one of just the powerhouse teams in that classification. But to finish the point I was making, the only really team that at least that I've looked at within that region is Fall City, and they could be kind of on a down year, but it's only week 3, so let's wait and see. Obviously, El Dorado, they're still working things out with Coach Long, and a lot of turnover on the offensive line. And then Yorktown, and then that's ended up where TLCA's old head coach Brent Ryder ended up. He's the defensive coordinator there now. So, I mean, we'll see. But if the Cougars get going, like, this team's got a lot of potential. I really think so. Yeah,
there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered, and rightfully so. I mean, we're still pre-district games.
Yeah. We're not going to know. The thing is these coaches that schedule the hard games, they figure out more about their football teams, and it's better that they're doing that. But sometimes you just can't get teams to play you either. Yeah. I mean, you probably know better than anyone about that.
When you're winning, it's hard to find games. When you're losing, everybody wants to play, and lots of travel. The game out here Thursday night, those two teams drove 3 hours to get here to play each other, and that's what happens in that situation.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Like I said, it's great to have you on here because you strive to go to, if not one, but multiple games every Friday night. Just I know you come from a coach's family. I know you were a coach yourself. Just what is it about Texas high school football, especially in West Texas, that you think just makes it so special?
It's the high school game. These kids are out there fighting, making mistakes, doing great things. And, it all comes down to the end. And it's, like I said, it's been a lifetime for me with Dad, born to a coach. And the Friday Night Lights, there's nothing better. I mean, it's whether it's on TV as a movie, it's being out here, it's going to games. As many, you can ask my wife, I'm just glad we're playing football. Mm-hmm. Gives me something to do and games to go see. And like last night, I went to Ballinger and coming back from there wasn't anything else going on that I needed to go see. I was kind of watching that Wall game, seeing if I need to sneak that way, but I didn't have a ticket. I'd have snuck in somehow, but it was, it's what we do, staying around the area, and you can get to 2 games in a night and occasionally 3 if somebody will play a real slow one, but it's sometimes those aren't fun to watch.
Yeah, no, those games where it's 4 and out or 3 and outs or 4 and outs and whatever, if they're going for it on 4th down, but it's a lot of throwing and the clock stops. Yeah, that can be. We've seen a couple of those so far this season where we're getting done at 11 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we've also seen some of those quick games like Lakeview Lamesa.
Yes,
that game was over by what was it, like 9:15?
That it was a quick one, and that's what those teams are throwing it 50 times a game. Coach Spike Dykes, the ex-Texas Tech Red Raider coach, he said one time, one of my favorite quotes was, he said, "There's nothing more boring in football than an incomplete pass."
That's a fact.
It's true, though.
It's if they complete them all, that's okay. It's a fast game. If they don't, you're there for a while.
That's why Texas Tech football games take a long time.
No, not even that, but even if you're watching it on TV, I mean, that's commercial break. No, it's definitely more enjoyable when you're actually out there in the atmosphere. But nope, you mentioned hopefully, we got 5A, 6A starting up here soon. We'll obviously give you guys the coverage of Central when they kick off. But hopefully those teams can abide to those UIL COVID guidelines, and we can have some 5A, 6A football.
You going out to the scrimmage on Thursday night?
Yes. Is it Cooper? Yes, I'll be there.
Good old fashioned little Southwest Conference rivalry for a scrimmage.
Friends on both sidelines. That'll be a lot of fun.
It's perfect. It's just fitting too. Like they're back in there with everyone, and then they're going to. I mean, they've scrimmaged Cooper in the past. Mm-hmm. It's not this isn't a new thing, right. But still, they're getting the full dose of their old traditional opponents.
It's going to be fun.
I'm excited about what the Bobcats have on their roster too.
Yeah, it should be an exciting season for Central, especially them linking back up with the Little Southwest Conference. And I know, Jaden, I know that's, that
it's childhood.
Hits home for
it's
you.
Childhood. Abilene High, and then moved to Midland and graduated from Midland High, and now my first job has been in San Angelo. So now I'm, I got multiple teams that I kind of have to root for. I mean, Midland High doesn't do a lot for me because I hadn't been good in a while. But Coach A to Z is doing good over there. It's just hard to compete with some of the talent that Lee and Permian. It's just this district's no joke. Like, I mean, it's fun, and that you can talk about the Metroplex and what that aspect of football might bring to, it's just a different atmosphere. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, there's nothing like it.
You talk about making the West Texas Triangle.
It's every Friday night. That's going to be the name of a new book. I don't know who's going to write it.
You should write it.
You.
That'd be awesome.
I can
Every Friday
forward it, or we'll just go. I'll ghostwrite it, I guess, or something like that. Just sit down and just hear the thoughts of Brett Lang, because that would actually probably be an interesting afternoon.
You probably have some awesome stories you could tell too.
I've got stories. I don't know if they're awesome or not.
Well, okay, so what is an awesome story? Just a random story that comes to your mind. We're talking about high school football. Because you're full of them, I know. I've heard some great stories from you.
You didn't prepare me.
It's
for
funny,
that.
yes.
Because
no, it's all. I go off the cuss sometimes.
Yeah,
I mean, we got it.
Jaden. Really, right now, this is as much as I love high school football. I played in Borger. My junior year in high school, we were picked to be pretty good. We had one of those injury seasons. We ended up winning 2 games. My senior year, we won 2 games. So. Our district was the 4 Amarillo schools in Pampa back then. It wasn't the Little Southwest Conference, but it was a lot of fun and still, relationships with some of those guys that hang pretty tight. Then to go to college in Abilene, you get in on the edge of the Little Southwest Conference there, and we got to go out every Friday night. There was a game at the stadium there in Abilene at Shotwell, and always watch Friday night football. I mean, we had meetings, of course, but got to be back in time for those. But it was the West Texas thing's a big deal. I mean, it's just the movie Friday Night Lights, and what the true and the false of that. It's not exactly the way it happened, but it's these guys, and Coach Davis and his staff, to watch them. I was coaching in Brownwood in 2009, which is, I believe, the year that Coach Davis got here, and we scrimmaged them, and they had a bunch of kids. But what they've done with that program has been amazing to watch that turnaround. And it's every year competing for the big games.
Seriously, is impressive. No, I mean, I know, like, Coach Davis is viewed by San Angelo. Coach Davis is viewed as a good head coach, and I think he's gotten good recognition across the state of Texas as well. But really, like, what he inherited,
mm-hmm.
I mean, weren't they on like a 20-something losing streak for a while?
They were not very good for the year we scrimmaged them, and they're in Brownwood. But I mean, they got after it, and they were getting after it, from that point to where we are today. And it's going to be fun to watch. Let's get them back on the field and get those guys playing, and let's finish this thing. That just extends the high school football season for me, and I'm glad with it.
Exactly. And one thing I know we kind of went on a Bobcats tangent, but one thing to kind of remember about them, and also with Abilene High, because Abilene High has been down, but they've been in that district with Central. Central, before making the move to the east and the Metroplex and everything, they'd won 5 straight district championships. And the level of competition really does, when you're having to play and also drive to the Metroplex for some of these games, it's just not the same. And get them back in there. Lee's the favorites, and they should be based on a lot of the talent that they have, but don't count Central out. And I wouldn't even count Abilene High. I'm not saying Abilene High maybe a district championship, but they've been on a bit of a missing the playoffs. Don't count them out either.
What was the name of that book? Every Friday Night?
What was the one, the Abilene High, or
the one I'm going to write?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Every Friday night, yeah.
Right.
Brett Lang's got some ideas.
You see over here. Okay.
This is where the idea was born when this thing gets published. But no, so it'll be an interesting season, if I can speak today. An interesting season for Central, and it makes things even more interesting when that district is up for grabs.
It's all right. It's the high school football hangover.
High school football hangover. We go on tangents on this show. That's the Central Bobcat one. But no, we talked about Sweetwater, Lakeview. Sweetwater, they hand Lakeview their first loss of the season, 58-42. Cristoval, they come back to beat Sonora 22-14. We are closing in on show close, so we're just going to go ahead and touch on a couple more games. Ozona, they lost to Reagan County. We mentioned at the top of the program, 46-13. The Lions had the second largest spread entering the week of all the Concho Valley games. They were picked to beat Reagan County by 37 points. What happened out there in Ozona?
They'll be okay.
They'll be all right.
Coach Taylor's a good coach, and he's got it.
No overreaction Monday.
No overreaction. They'll be okay.
He was raised in a coaching home as well. He'll be back. Don't worry about those guys.
They'll be fine.
Everyone has tough losses. Wall losing to San Antonio Corner Christian. The scoreboard may look like a tough loss, 24-6, but Wall, they really hung in there. 7-0 at the half, but the Warriors, they came out and they scored 14 unanswered in the third to really kind of take the momentum there. Wall, they have that big game against Mason next week.
Homecoming for them.
Hawk Stadium. It's always rowdy. I know Brett knows about how rowdy it gets at Hawk Stadium. They got the new turf out there now.
Well, the thing with Wall, last night you said it was 7-0, and they come out in the second half and they had a snap go over the punter's head into the end zone. I'm kind of like you, Brett. I was listening to the game on the way back from Ballinger, and I'm obviously cheering on Wall. I want Wall to beat that team because Cornerstone is one of those teams that they recruit. They've got Converse Judson products coming in, and they've been kicked out of TAPS for recruiting kids. This isn't like a secret. The fact that they lost 24-6 is impressive in my eyes. The offense couldn't get anything going. Just that's the speed difference, the talent. I mean, you're basically throwing 6A kids against 3A kids.
That really is a good comparison. It's kids that could be playing at the 5A, 6A level out there on Friday night, against the Wall kids. And Wall didn't back down. They may have lost on the scoreboard, but those kids, assuming they're all healthy, they'll be ready to go this week against Mason, I promise you.
That's a Wall mentality too.
Yes, it is.
And I think that's the biggest thing that you can really take away from this game. I think, like I wrote that win or lose, this game's going to be a positive for Wall. Of course, if no one gets hurt, if someone gets hurt, then that's a different story. But, they come out and they played them well in the first half. And if it weren't for the touchdown, the overhead snap, it would have been 17-16. And that alone, just that score is impressive. I know that we talk about Wall a lot, but it's because they're scheduling good games, one, and they're playing good opponents well. Like the fact that they beat Cisco the way that they did last week, that Cisco team's not just a pushover either.
Yep.
So, I mean, Wall's going to be okay. A loss is a loss, and take it with what you want. But Coach Guy scheduled these guys for a reason, and it was to get them ready for a team that they would see in the playoffs, like Brock. And Brock is looking like they're no joke this year either. And it very well could come down to a regional matchup, and the winner of that game, I mean, might be punching a ticket to the state championship game.
You win some, you lose some. And I know Wall, we kind of had this conversation towards the end of the season for Wall last year where it's, okay, they're 9-0, okay, they're 10-0. And you just kind of you felt something looming. And when we talked to the players, you just kind of felt something looming about, when is the loss coming? When is the loss coming? And I think it's good to kind of get one of those games, like the game against Cornerstone Christian, out of the way, especially before district starts, especially with the tough challenge that San Antonio Corner Christian poses. I think Wall did a good job in the 24-6.
Yeah, just to touch one last thing, I talked about how impressive that score was. I mean, there were people saying Wall is going to lose by 30 or 40 points. So, like, seriously, like that was a good game, and kudos to them. Kudos to Houston Guy for scheduling that game, and kudos to those kids for playing the way that they did.
Yep. Wall, they're hosting Mason next week. Winless Mason. I didn't think I'd sit up here and say that. 0-3 next week. Like you said, homecoming for Wall, 7:30 p.m. Hawk Stadium. We will be out there for sure. Robert Lee, they come back to beat Very Best 33-32. That was one of the ones that surprised us. I know we both picked Very Best on our Week 3 preview show that we put out every Wednesdays. If you don't know, just go ahead and plug
the
that.
Casual plugs. I love them.
Plug.
I love it.
Subscribe to the podcast feed. We have previews on Wednesdays, and then we'll simulcast like we're doing now with the fancy cameras and graphics on Saturdays. But no, Robert Lee really coming out, and they beat Very Best 33-32. Very Best was coming off an impressive 10-point win over Zephyr in their season opener last week. Falcons, they led 20-6 early in the third. I know that's not a lot for a six-man game, but given these two teams, they also led 32-27 with 1:04 to play. And how about Ivan Escamilla for Robert Lee? 4 touchdowns, including the go-ahead score.
The senior getting things done, leading a bunch of young kids, and or not kids. I don't like calling them kids. Young adults or young high schoolers. I'm struggling right now because I'm on the high school football hangover, and no, but they're a young football team, and Ivan is the leader of that team, and he proved it last night.
Yeah, good win for Kerry Owens.
Coach Kerry Owens can coach. He really can. I mean, he'll have those kids flying around.
Especially with how young they are. Keep your eye on Robert Lee here.
Yes.
The next couple of
years.
Who
knows? It really, because they haven't have a large sample size. They played Irion the first week, and Erion's Irion County's a good team. So we've still got some things to figure out with Very Best, Robert Lee, Paint Rock. Even they're undefeated still technically. They're actually our 4th team that's undefeated. They're 1-0 because they haven't been able to play games because of COVID stuff. So
hopefully they can get back on the field soon.
Yeah, and Paint Rock is another one that should have an uptick. They're on the rise kind of with the program.
Young as well too. I think 7 of 14 players have never played high school football before out in Paint Rock.
I went out to see them last week, Coach Wooten, and I think he was sick at that point in time. And the kids they're suited up, full gear, practicing on the playground across the street from the school, and there wasn't a blade of grass on that field. But those kids were out there. I mean, I said, okay, I didn't want to watch too much of it, but I stayed there for a little while and didn't want to get anybody in trouble. But it was they're out there trying to get better.
That's what it's all about too. That's what it's all about. This next one, I'm gonna let Jaden out of the cage here on this next one. Sterling City, they pick up the win over O'Donnell to stay perfect, 3-0 for the Eagles.
Really, not much to say. I mean, there's some.
Just say you were right.
I was right. Yeah, I mean, I was right. Was I not? I just said that they were going to 45 of them, mercy rule them, or it's still premature with a lot of this, but I think it's safe to say that Sterling City is good. O'Donnell, plugging stuff inside the game. I talked about it last night in my lead in to the highlights, but O'Donnell has some good wins. They beat Gordon and they beat Garden City. Garden City's a little down, but it's still Garden City. They're still going to be competitive, no matter if the team is young or not. But there was some, talk like O'Donnell might upset Sterling City or, give them a run for their money. I mean, Sterling City's good. Sterling's and what's going to be really exciting is this week's game, Borden County, because Borden County knocked off Rankin last night, and Rankin is the #1 team in the state. And for the Sterling City fans out there, last year Sterling City beat Rankin and then played spoiler in the playoffs because they knocked Sterling City off.
Right.
So, no, that's going to be a big one. That's, I think it's a point in the 6-man season where they're going all out, and Eden's another one of the teams which, they're scheduling good games. Yep. And so, losses here and there, well, that's fine. How are they going to do in district? Let's get into the playoffs and learn some things.
Yep, absolutely. And like you said, Eden, they lose to Ira. They're 1-2 now. Blackwell loses to Highland 42-22. Does that shock any of you guys?
I bet that was a fun game to watch. What are they, 15 miles apart? I bet that was a good game. I bet there was some intensity to it. And
I mean, Blackwell is just they're not down necessarily. I mean, they're not the same team where they've gone 3 seasons in a row undefeated or undefeated in the regular season. Good, and they're not, state semifinalists good yet. Maybe they can get that way because we're again talking week 3, but they've got some younger kids but they still have Cameron Coldiron. They still have Nathaniel Shipman. Like they've got some kids that are back from last year's team. They'll do fine. Clint Lowry is a good coach, and he'll have them ready.
Absolutely. Just taking a look, we have our papers for week 4 here. We mentioned Mason Wall. Clyde Ballinger could be a good one. Coleman in Grape Creek, looking for an upset out in Grape Creek over the Coleman Blue Cats. Ozona versus Menard. Number 5, Wink versus El Dorado. Borden County, Sterling City. A lot of great games here in the Concho Valley. Brett, which ones do you kind of have your eye on? Maybe going to?
I'm looking if I can get a ticket, and I'll wait till Thursday to try to get tickets. I don't want to take tickets away from parents or grandparents. But that Borden County Sterling City game looks pretty good. It really does. It'll be
see you there.
There'll be some intensity there. I promise you that.
See you there, Brett.
Absolutely. 2 top 10 teams going at it. Number 6, Borden County. Number 3, Sterling City. I'll be out in El Dorado if you want to come say hi. Number 5, Wink. El Dorado hosting them at 7:30. As
just getting familiar with old Wink. All of our teams are playing it this year.
It should be a good one. We'll see. Wink's defense has been incredible this year. We'll see how they contain Cooper Metter and Corbin Covarrubias and all those guys out in El Dorado. We are running out of time, just like week 3 of the season. This episode of Locker Room Rewind is also in the books. As cheesy as that sounds and how scripted that sounds,
it is.
I shouldn't have wrote it like that, but that's how it is. We're done here. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Brett Lang, for joining us. It's always great talking. And
this is the guy. This is the guy.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, he's shaking his head. This is the guy.
He knows it. He knows it.
Good man.
We'll have you on again sometime. If you're listening to us in the podcast format, make sure to subscribe to our podcast feed to stay up to date with all the high school football action going on around the Concho Valley. And if we're talking about plugs, you can check out all the content on ConchoValleyHomepage.com. Scores, stats, highlights, a replay of Jaden's Inside the Game.
Well, let's plug FCA too, and everything that Brett's that you guys do for kids.
We're still hoping to get on campuses again eventually. It's still pretty well locked down for us, but I can watch games and practices from outside the fence. I've watched some with binoculars, but I'll be there. I'm somewhere, and looking forward to it. But thank you guys for the plug for FCA.
Oh yeah. Well, before we actually wrap it up, just kind of tell us a little bit about what FCA does for the student athletes schools around here.
We reach out. We cover 13 counties, 28 high school campuses, 12 junior high campuses, 1 elementary school campus, plus Angelo State University. I say we, it's me. Stephanie, the boss, is sitting back in the corner. She's the one that keeps all the books and does all the computer stuff, and I just get in the truck and drive and pushing kids, pushing kids and coaches to make decisions, a positive decision for their lives, and that's what we do.
You and the entire FCA, you guys do great work around the state. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
This has been awesome.
We'll have you on again sometime.
Oh, that's kind of scary.
We'll talk some more high school football. Again, subscribe to our podcast feed. Check out ConchoValleyHomepage.com. This guy right up here, if you're listening to the podcast format, you don't know what I'm talking about. Chunky Nelms Insurance, our sponsor. Thank you so much. Check out www.chunkynelms.com. Get assured today. Access to over 20 insurance companies to make sure you guys have the best value. 1121 South Abe Street. That does it here from Sunset Mall in the digital studio. We'll be back on Wednesday with a week 4 preview. See you guys later.